You know, all the left-wing leaning channels, they don't have their number one ratings maker, Donald Trump, to beat the heck out of every single day. So what are they talking about? Well, they're not talking about Andrew Cuomo and him potentially killing thousands of New Yorkers by sending them back to the nursing home. No, they're not talking about Andrew Cuomo being accused of sexual harassment and sexual assault by one of his former staffers. They're not talking about any of that. I flip over to the other channels, and all I see is these blaring headlines. Tiger Woods, broken leg. Tiger Woods, not impaired. Tiger Woods, no investigation. And that's the big news to the left right now because they got nothing else to talk about. But my dear friend, who joins me all the time, Dr. Carole Lieberman, she's America's psychiatrist, joins me right now to talk about, she believes there are many reasons why this may be a cover-up. And you know what they say, Doc, the cover-up is worse than the crime. What are you sniffing out here?
Yes, I happen to have been driving around the day that he had this so-called accident, and so I was listening to the radio for hours, and it's just like you're saying that they're still doing now, talking about how he's not impaired. The officer at the scene said that from the beginning. He rushed to judgment. This is clearly star treatment. This guy was probably is a fan of Tiger Woods. And right away, they didn't take a blood sample when they got to see him. They didn't, how did this guy decide that he was not impaired? He didn't make him, obviously, he couldn't get out and do a sobriety test, walk a straight line. But if this would have been Joe Schmo, any old Joe Schmo, they would have certainly at least done a blood test, and they wouldn't have been so quick to rush to judgment and tell everybody that he wasn't impaired.
Yeah, my father was a cop. When I was in college, he was also a private investigator on the side, and they used to actually do background checks back then, where you had to go knock on someone's door and say, hey, Bob put you down as a reference, and does he really live next door, and how long has he lived here, right? And my dad used to let me do this stuff for like $5 an hour and, knock on doors, right? So I have like a little bit of a whiff of, I smell something, I don't like it. And when I saw them proactively come out and say, no evidence of impairment, then I immediately start thinking there was an impairment.
Exactly. And, of course they took him to the hospital right away. That makes sense. And the hospital would have taken blood tests. They brought him into surgery. They rushed him into surgery so that at the very least they would have taken blood for type and cross match, because to give him potentially a blood transfusion. So there is blood, and yet we're still hearing that there's no, evidence. There was no toxicology screen done or any of this. And there are lots of reasons why we should be sniffing something. For one thing, progressively, 2 days before this crash, he was doing a television interview. And
I saw it.
Yes. And did you see how he looked? He looked impaired then.
Yeah, you know what? I thought, for that, you're talking about on Sunday at the golf tournament. It was his tournament. I was watching the tournament, and he was, kind of, slumped over a little, talking to them. And I was like, man, my own tournament, I'd be a little more peppy. Hey, guys, yeah, what a day. You know what I mean? He didn't look like that. He looked lethargic.
Yes, and his fans apparently, or people were writing on social media, he looked bloated, he looked tired. Yes, and you just see his face. And you can tell that there's something wrong. So that was 2 days before. Then he left the hotel he was in. And there were all these reports about how he almost hit a car of a TV director, and he was described as being agitated and in a rush because he was supposedly held up by the valet. Then we know that he was speeding. I think there's more and more evidence coming out about that. There were no skid marks. Now, psychologically, that is very significant. Because what that means is he didn't realize for all that trip, he went from one side of the road across the median all the way into the bushes on the other side, and he didn't brake. What does that tell you? It shows that he was not thinking clearly. He was impaired.
Right. And from what I understand, I was watching a pretty good breakdown of it the first day by some former National Highway Transportation Safety guy. And he said that this area is a big downhill. And they have these little turnoffs for trucks where if they're going too fast, they can go back uphill to slow them down so they don't ride off the road. And he was saying that it kind of looks like Tiger was trying to get into the turnoff to slow himself down, and when he hit the curb, he went up in the air. But now they're saying, conveniently, Tiger has no recollection of anything.
Yes, right. Which is another sign, actually. I mean, yes, there could be several different reasons why you don't have memory of an accident. One is if you hit your head, and blacked out for a bit. But certainly another one is if you were on some kind of substance. And now another example is for why this is fishy. We know he had back surgery in December. He did an interview where he talked about still feeling stiff. I mean, what is and he's talked about still recovering from the back surgery. So what is the likelihood that he, especially given his whole history of back surgeries and painkillers and so on, what is the likelihood that he was not on a painkiller at that time?
I just, in teasing your segment, I said there's probably some painkillers still floating around. And I'm not trying to put down Tiger because I love him. America loves a redemption story. He's now humbled himself. He's been so much better, I think, of a person since he had his travails. But we both know, Doc, that this pandemic and stuff has caused a lot of people into recidivism where they're going back to their old, and maybe the back surgery, maybe a little depression that he's off the tour again, maybe a few too many Vicodins or Percocets or whatever, and then before you know it, you're blacked out and you're flipping over 50 times. I hope that's not the case, and quite frankly, I'm with you. I don't think we'll ever know the truth.
Well, first of all, those are very good points that you just made, but I think it's really important that we know the truth. That's why, I'm talking about this cover-up, because it's not just people, a lot of people look up to him, a lot of young people. And it's not fair for them to just hear about, how he had this comeback and how he is doing so great at golf. They need to hear about the other problems that he's having, because maybe that would teach some young kid, hey, maybe I better not drink, or I better not take painkillers or any other kinds of drugs when I drive.
Yeah, well, let's hope. I don't know. Doc, we got about a minute left. I know you wanted to talk about this appeal to the European Court of Human Rights over discriminatory testosterone limits or something? Oh, okay, well, maybe Tom wanted me to ask you about that, but don't worry about it. You were so good on Tiger. We'll talk about testosterone.
Maybe testosterone has something to do with Tiger.
All right. Well, Dr. Carole Lieberman, with her 2 cents, and not far off, if you ask me. I think there's more to the story, but America's psychiatrist joins us all the time, and her words and thoughts are always welcome and well received, might I add. Thank you, Doc. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Dr. Carole Lieberman, right here, talking to you about Tiger. I guess that's the big news, but lots more news to come.